Or some of the books that you most loved from childhood, and then we'll transition to what sort of books do you love now?
Yeah, that was another thing that I was really lucky. So my parents, they were part of a hippie commune, or it's not commune, ashram, in Gilroy, California, I think. And although they weren't allowed to stay because they got pregnant with me, and you're supposed to be abstinent, but they had a lot of good friends in the community, and some of whom worked in a San Francisco bookshop. And so they brought a lot of books to our rural, out to our rural property. And so I got really lucky. I got a lot of feminist books too, or at least what I would consider feminist. So people like Patricia C. Red, which is some of my probably one of my favorite of all time. The Enchanted Forest Chronicles. So there's 4 books, and I love those books. It's about a princess who wants to become a dragon's servant instead of marrying a prince, and the humor, and it's really fun. And then also Robin McKinley was another one that I read a lot of. She writes female characters who defy the stereotypes, especially back then. Patricia McKillop and Mercedes Lackey. Anne McCaffrey was one of my favorite. Even as a 12-year-old, I was reading Anne McCaffrey, and I read all of her series. I also read, people like Terry Brooks and, the Sharanara series. And I read Tolkien, but briefly, just once. And so, my fantasy was always very heavily female written and female driven, which, given that I was outside of any kind of community that was interested in sci-fi or fantasy, to me, that's what fantasy was. And then when, all of a sudden publishing industry happened and I was, shopping fantasy science fiction books, it was a wake-up call to be like, oh no, it's mostly heavily male, written. So that's been an interesting, but I think I happened to join the publishing industry as things were shifting. And I just kind of rode that shift a little bit.
I am, as we record this, about 2/3 of the way through Parable the Sower for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, 1, why have I never read this book before? And 2, where's the movie? Where's the television series? This should have already blown up.
Oh my gosh. Learning about, how books turn into movies has, I'm not surprised now, because I always used to think about that too. Like, why isn't this book a movie? And now I kind of know why, but.
Well, now as a writer, I tend to have the opinion that, hey, you know what, I don't need a movie. I've got the book right up here. I've seen the movie, and 9 times out of 10, the movie tends to be a bit of a letdown after a wonderful book.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
There's that rare film that really hits it, or in some cases surpasses the original.
I think that definitely can happen, but I agree that 9 out of 10 times the book is better than the movie.
Well, I wanted to ask, I've got all kinds of questions for you about what you're looking for now, and well, you know what, let's start there, because I know esteemed audience is leaning in, like, Mary C. Moore sounds amazing. I want to know more about her. Is she interested in the kind of books that I'm writing right now? And I assure you, esteemed audience, yeah, she probably is. So what kind of books are you looking for?
Definitely. Yeah, so I've definitely opened up to pretty much all fiction at this point, spanning from middle grade to young adult to adult fiction. In the past, it's definitely leaned speculative, but it's that doesn't mean that's all I'm interested in. I have found the one common thread that seems to go through most of my books is the idea that there's tropes, but at the same time, the author breaks those tropes. They have something different to say, whether or not, it's coming from a marginalized point of view, or it's, feminist, or, but whatever it is, or it's, coming from a different culture. I have found that that's what I'm most interested in. And, anytime an author has something really smart to say, without it being kind of heavy-handed, I find really interesting as well. So, plus beautiful writing. And so I'm pretty much open to all genres as long as it's fiction.
Gotcha. So what would be a really smart thing? What's an example of something that would spark your brain and get interested? I assume Girl Giant and the Monkey King would really spark your brain and get you going.
Definitely, yeah. That's a great example. Girl Giant and the Monkey King is by my client Van Hong, and she does a Percy Jackson twist with Vietnamese mythology, and the main character is an 11-year-old Vietnamese American girl, and so the conversation that happens throughout the book is one of family. It's she's got a really interesting relationship with her mother, and it's also like her struggle to want to fit in by denying her culture, but at the same time, learning about her own culture. And I think it's a struggle that a lot of kids are going to be going through, or have gone through, and are going to be going through. I mean, I look at my daughter is half Mexican, and she's bilingual, and she's only 5 years old, but she's already kind of navigating that in between area of who am I? She calls herself Mexican, and then she asks what I am, and we have those conversations. So I would love to see especially books for kids where the characters are exploring their identities more, but not in a heavy-handed way, and not with an agenda by the author or by the book. So I think Girl Giant and the Monkey King does a great job of that. And the sequel's coming out soon, and the artwork is done by a pair of Vietnamese illustrators, and it's absolutely amazing. And everybody should check it out. And then another good example would be another book that my client C.L. Clark, their book just released this past March, called The Unbroken. This is an adult fantasy, military fantasy, but she really kind of breaks down, the sort of the colonialism of, what happens after colonialism, from both, the colonizer and those who've been colonized. And it's a really fascinating, really, really smart read. Granted, it helps that she has her PhD, and I'm going to get this inaccurate, so I'm not going to say exactly what it's in, but it's something to do with colonialism.
Fair enough. So what was it, and were both of those books that were queried to you? So what was it about those particular projects that right away struck your interest? Was it just a really well-written query, an amazing online presence by the author? What was it that got you excited about wanting to represent them?
Actually, no. For me, both of them queried me. I believe The Unbroken was a Hit Mad pitch from a long time ago, but and then she queried something else originally. So for me, my interest is actually in the author themselves. So, it might not be, I know that it might not be the first project I sell, but I feel that they have something to say, something interesting to say, and they're a good writer, but they don't have to be, brilliant at everything. I just want to know that they have something to say, that they have a passion, and when that's the case, then I know that even if this project doesn't necessarily sell, we will work together to find one that will. And I would say about half of my clients, it's been like that, where it's not the first project that sells, it's the second or even the third. And I'm getting a little bit more as I get further on in my career and I have more clients. I have to be a little bit more, not sure the word for this. Picky, I guess. So yeah, the ones that I'm finding now are, maybe they have, maybe it's a little bit more appealing if they have a big online presence or things like that. But particularly for debut fiction authors, the online presence doesn't really affect my decision on whether or not I offer them representation. And, these days social media is not the healthiest place. So I don't necessarily demand that of my clients anymore either.
Excellent. I'm routinely seeing that some authors with just the world's biggest social media presence have a book that comes out and like, oh, here we come, brace yourself, and then it does fine, but it doesn't do tremendous things. And then there'll be some newcomer with no social media presence that we've never heard of before that just blows everybody away.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's one of the greatest joys and miseries of the publishing industry is that you never know what's going to be the next big thing. And that's why, I think a lot of agents kind of repeat the mantra of don't chase the trends because of this. If you're a quick writer and you know that you can kind of pump out a book quick and a quality book quick, and it can land on a trend, and you're happy kind of getting those books out quickly and being on trend, it can definitely work for some authors. But the type of clients I work with, I tend, like, again, as I talked about, something they have to say tends to be on looking forward, looking into the future, or looking into the new conversations that are happening online, or social conversations that are happening globally. And I think that those stories really find their voice in a more solid ways than people who have like a ton of like 500,000 followers on Twitter or something.
So for the writers out there who might be as neurotic as I am, which I assume has to be a fair percentage of the audience, you say that the author doesn't have to be brilliant necessarily at everything. What are the things it's okay to not be brilliant at?
That's a great question. Maybe, I would say that, maybe your plots aren't totally tight, or, maybe you throw in an extra adverb here and there, or, maybe you're not able to write a perfect pitch. That's all fine. If you have something like, and I think I keep saying this phrase over and over again, but I think if you have something to say, and you're able to weave it into a story that speaks to people, you're gonna get there, whether or not it's a long road, which it is often for most writers, or if it's a very short road for those lucky few. You don't have to be perfect at everything. You just have to stay true to your vision of why you're a writer and why you want to write.